Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Ani Anderson, who helps people find their soul's agenda and connect with themselves. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote is from Buddha. To enjoy good health, to bring true happiness to one's family, to bring peace to all, one must first discipline and control one's own mind. If a man can control his mind, he can find the way to enlightenment, and all the wisdom and virtue will naturally come to him. Today's intro is focused on health. I recently went on a 3-day fast to see if it could help. It has, and I had some unexpected changes. First off, every time we eat, our body has to digest that food, and a tremendous amount of resources are shifted to our gut to make that happen. When you are constantly eating, the body has to constantly work. When you stop eating, those resources can be shifted to other areas of the body. One change I've noticed is my hearing improved. I don't know why. I don't know if it's correlated, but you know what? I'll take it. It's amazing how much of our lives are tied up around food. I did learn you don't need to eat every day. And since then, I've increased my intermittent fasting program. As it is, I rarely eat breakfast, and now I skip lunch a few times a week. It helps me to free up time, and it helps me to be more focused. And yes, I work out without eating. My body knows how to handle this, and I've never had a problem with energy. Now, this isn't something you can do immediately. It's something that takes time. I've been doing intermittent fasting for a long time. So my body was already used to going for stretches without food, and I'm continuing to increase those. In life, we need to constantly challenge our beliefs and ourselves and change the lens that we look at life through. And our guest and I are going to talk about that today. Ani Anderson is on a mission to make sure that women never ask themselves, "What's wrong with me?" ever again. Author of Find Your Soul's Agenda and co-creator of sensation-based mindset coaching, Ani has been in the personal development industry for nearly 20 years. It wasn't until her own life fell apart and needed to become her own client that she was able to take pieces from all her training in rehabilitation, energy healing, and coaching to create a powerful yet simple system that healed her own life, and since hundreds of other people's lives as well. Ani believes that we are all craving a connection with something greater than ourselves, and also the freedom to express that vitality with others. Ani sees her clients come alive as they find their soul's agenda, often commenting that it makes their whole life make sense. Ani and her husband teach coaches, therapists, and healers how to use the Find Your Soul's agenda and other sensation-based mindset strategies with their clients so that they can quickly get to core issues, moving through the discomfort of change and create a new reality in any area of life. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Richer Soul, Ani. It's great to have you join us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Rocky. I'm excited to be here.
And I'm excited to have you join us. So, we always start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Not a whole heck of a lot. I can remember a very vivid, it might be even my first money memory, Rocky. I was always given money from my family my extended family for my birthday. And my birthday is about 3 weeks before Christmas time. And I must have been about 8. And I was in my room at my house and I was holding birthday money in my hand. And I remember thinking, I should spend this on my Christmas presents that I was going to be buying other people. I don't know what it was that made me think that, but I had this tremendous sense of guilt if I were to spend it on myself for something frivolous. And so I remember spending it on Christmas presents for other people. Much later, maybe last year even, I told my dad about that money memory. And he said, why didn't you tell me? I would have given you money. I think that memory in and of itself makes me realize how we didn't talk much about money. So what I learned about money, I think I learned through watching my parents and the other people around me, but we didn't really talk about it. It wasn't a conversation we were having.
And that's not surprising. And actually, it's kind of funny because even when parents talk to you about money, you don't listen. It's their actions that you listen to. And so, in a sense, you were learning through the actions, which is what kids do anyway. And so It depends whether or not they are a great model or they don't model well. And that's where we pick up those types of lessons. And I think you have kids. Have you done anything to teach your kids about money differently?
Oh my goodness, yes. So my wealth consciousness journey really began in earnest, I guess about 5 or 6 years ago. And so I have watched myself stumble all over all kinds of limiting beliefs and all kinds of behavior. And one of the things I have tried to do with my children is to be more transparent about my own journey. So to be speaking about the awarenesses that I'm having of the thoughts that I'm thinking, or when I catch myself in certain behavior. Money is something that we definitely talk about a lot in our house. We have gone through some different incarnations with allowances and how that goes. We talk about saving. We have a system that we use for where they place their money. So some of it's for spending and some of it's for saving and some of it's for impact. So there is actually a lot of conversation in our house around money. We have 2 13-year-olds and both of them are going to be coming into a place where we start keeping track of money with them. I think that's a valuable skill that I didn't get to experiment with until I was in college and actually needed to do it for myself and no one really taught me. So I'm excited to do that with our kids.
And that's awesome. Creating that base and being intentional, you will most likely end up with the results you want. Not to say that you won't go through some hiccups and some ups and downs, but it's great when you learn lessons with small amounts of money that essentially don't matter, right? And so if kids can make mistakes, learn their lessons, then when they roll out into life, they've got a strong base and they know what to do and they do it well.
Yeah. I love so much the relationship that we have with our children. We are the parents, but we definitely have a relationship where we talk about growth in a way that I don't remember my parents talking with me about. And so I'm really excited as they emerge into teenagers for this new step in their development and my development as a parent. This is the first time I'm doing it, so we'll see how it goes. It's really been an exciting unfolding for me as they get older. I think that so far my most difficult time with my children was when they were first learning how to speak and they couldn't really communicate. But since then, every year provides more richness capacities.
That it does. And you're kind of at that turning point now where they're about to make, I always say about 12, 13 is where they make that next pivot in life. The first pivot's probably around 5 or 6, where they're finally self-sufficient. They can use the bathroom, clean themselves, feed themselves, and kind of are on their own, and they start school. And this is kind of that second pivot where they're becoming adults, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And all those hormonal changes come, and they kind of are now going to start pulling away from you and trying to become their own person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what kind of conversations are these that you're having? How do you keep that going? Because I know for a lot of people, they always think of the teenage years as the difficult years for their kids.
Well, one of the conversations that I'm not afraid to have with my kids is the conversation about when I feel like I've made a mistake. And when I went to say that, Rocky, I almost stopped myself because I don't really feel like there are mistakes. I feel like there's always opportunities for growth. I guess what I mean by that is I let them in, like I was saying about money, I let them in to some of the thought processes that are going on. Or maybe if I feel like that wasn't the decision that was in the most alignment, I maybe could have done this, or I noticed something that seems to be a little off. We talk about a lot of things. I remember, must have been when my daughter was about 11, it really became apparent to me. That's funny to use the word apparent, actually. It became apparent to me that as the parent, she also had a lot to teach me. It wasn't just that I was the teacher. She could also be the teacher too. And she was really coming into this newfound consciousness. And so I remember saying to her, her name's Charlotte, we're in this together, and this is a lifetime relationship for you and I. It's not just about you being a kid and me being an adult. There's going to be a long time in our life where we're both adults. And I don't want to pretend that I know everything. Yes, I'm your parent and I know lots of stuff because I've lived for longer than you, but there's stuff that you're going to notice too. And I would really appreciate if we could have a really open conversation if you notice that, for example, I could be being a better person or something like that. And she took it in when I talked to her about it. And then I remember one day we were coming home, we pulled up in the car, and I was still in the car. We had been having some kind of conversation. I don't actually remember what it was. And I was still in the car. She had gotten out. She was standing on the steps of the house, and she just stopped and she stood there. And I got out and I said, "What?" And she said, "Remember that conversation that we had a while ago where you said that sometimes I'm going to notice stuff and I should say something?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I just feel like how you're thinking about whatever we were talking about, I feel like you could be more positive, or I feel like you could be more encouraging," or something like that, Rocky. And that moment meant so much to me because even though we hadn't been talking about it, even though it wasn't a big deal, she had taken that conversation that we had had initially to heart, and she had remembered it, and she had the courage to speak up and say something to me. And she was totally right. She was totally right. And I thanked her, and I value that. I value that we can each see value in each other. It's not just a one-way relationship where I'm the only one who has something to teach.
And that's very true. It is very much of a two-way relationship, and it is based on respect. And again, it comes, just like we talked about with money, it's your actions and the way you behave that teach them how to behave. So when you teach that two-way behavior of respect, then they learn to do that as well. And it's awesome that you have those conversations. And I'm wondering how many parents would have the courage to ask their kids, what can I do to be a better parent? And then actually shut up and listen.
Yeah, that comes up a lot for my clients when they are working with me, because there are these dynamics that play out in the relationship with their children, and they're afraid. And I can remember feeling like this in my life. They're afraid of looking like they don't know what to do, or they're not smart enough in the relationship, or perhaps losing control. It's scary. When you haven't experienced it before, it's scary to feel like you might lose control or they might overpower you. And I think that with the folks that we work with, we're really helping people to understand their emotional life and how they can relate to that in a very different way. And so teaching people how to really allow themselves to open up and live with an open heart so that they can experience their relationship work to be vulnerable like that.
It's interesting you say that, because I think a lot of the behaviors we have as adults are created as kids, and a lot of the baggage we have as adults is created as kids. And it's also interesting because we talk about different types of personalities. And I'm actually reading a book now about Enneagram personality tests.
Yeah.
And the neat thing about the book is it shows not just how you are as an adult with that personality type, but how you were as a kid with that personality type. And how that may cause some of the mindsets that you have now based on your personality type, and how you get caught in that loop and how you have to kind of break through the loop.
Yeah, absolutely. You're reminding me of this fascinating fact. I love thinking about this, that the subconscious mind doesn't know how old we are. Have you heard that before?
I have not heard that one.
Yeah, I love this. The subconscious mind doesn't actually know how old we are. And so some of the things that happen when we're children, they get stuck. And it's almost like in the subconscious, we pressed pause and we keep having these things come up over and over. And they show up as adults in different disguises, but based on things that happened as children. And now that I'm a parent and I can see what it's like to parent children, sometimes personality things that come out for our children, they're very pronounced and it can be difficult. I consider myself a pretty patient person, a pretty conscious parent, and still there are some personality tendencies that come out that are just difficult to be with sometimes. Sometimes I wonder, I've kind of given up this notion of trying to get it right, but I kind of wonder sometimes how that personality thing or trait is going to come out when they're older, knowing that some of those things are just going to get stuck in there in the subconscious and come out in different ways when they're older.
And so that was the neat thing in the book. It talked about your particular type, and then it showed how you were stuck in certain personality trait loops. And then it kind of talked about having someone help you recognize that you're in that loop. And then, so when you're seeing these things in your kids, it's almost like you're in that loop again and laughing it off. So that the kid starts to realize, I'm in that loop, and now I can change that pattern by breaking that pattern and doing something different.
I think that's a powerful conversation that we can have with our kids. We just had a really powerful conversation with our 13-year-old boy who is recognizing for the first time some patterns in his own life and how they show up in his body and they show up in behavior. You know, how he feels. When I say how they show up in his body, I mean how he feels. And they're showing up in his behavior. And we were able to have a conversation around it. And man, it was so awesome because we do this work all the time with adults. And for adults, because we've been doing it for so many years, those habits are so ingrained. We're watching him catch his patterns and make just tweaks and changes to them and alter, you know, his thoughts or his sensations in his body or his behavior based on the knowledge of the pattern. And it's phenomenal to watch him be able to do that. You know, he's 13, so I think he's able to be a little bit more flexible than sometimes we are as adults.
What's really cool, though, is he's learning to watch for his own patterns.
Yes.
And be observant and say, oh, I'm creating a loop. Oh, I can change a loop. And that will serve him into adulthood very well.
Oh my gosh. Could you imagine what the world would be like if people were witnessing and watching themselves like that?
It's the scariest thing, especially for a teenager to look in that mirror.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So let's take a step back and kind of dive into your journey. You started out with traditional medical education. Can you share a little bit about that and then where you went from there?
Sure. So I was trained as an occupational therapist in college. So I graduated and got a job and found myself in the Western medical system. And it was probably about 2 weeks after graduating. I remember standing in the clinic and I thought to myself, what did I do? I don't think this is right for me, but I don't know what to do next. You know, should I go back to school? I don't know what I would go for. And I can't go back to school. I just graduated with my master's degree. You know, like, what do I do? And so as an occupational therapist, by law, you need to take continuing education to keep your license. So I needed to do that, which was great. I love to learn. And I found myself being drawn to, I didn't know this at first, but I found out that I was being drawn to energy medicine practices. So I started to take some continuing ed. I found out that it was based in energy medicine, and it was super, super interesting to me. I started using some of it with my clients or my patients at the hospitals. It worked tremendously. It was so good. The results were awesome. And eventually I found myself in private practice. And one of the reasons was because I was a mom. I had my first child, and I wanted to really be able to be flexible with my career. So I started a private practice that primarily worked using energy medicine practices with children who were experiencing stress, anxiety, ADHD, and those kinds of things.
Let's just kind of define energy medicine for everyone. What would that entail?
Rocky, that's a really interesting question. I'll tell you what it usually means. Okay, because I've been doing this for a long time now, so I would describe it differently now. But usually, when people are talking about being an energy medicine practitioner, they're talking about working with the energy field of the body. So sometimes if you went to see an energy worker, they would put their hands on you, and they would probably maybe leave them in certain places and sense the energy on the body. A lot of times the practitioner would not put hands on the body. They would have hands hovering over the body. And they'd be working with the energy field or the energy centers that we call the chakras. That's usually what people are talking about when they talk about energy medicine. As my life has evolved, what I've come to really understand is that everything is energy. And so there's more than one way to work with energy. It's not just about doing hands-on healing. And I don't do hands-on work anymore. I haven't now for a number of years, but I still am doing energy medicine constantly. I just do it differently. I'm doing the energy medicine of the words that we speak, the energy medicine of the behaviors that we exhibit, those patterns that you and I were just talking about. We do it by looking at the sensory experience that a person is having in the body. So, since everything is energy, there's lots of ways to work with it. But in our practice, we're primarily looking at thoughts, words, sensations, and behaviors that people exhibit.
And I want to dig into that a little bit more. But before we do, you mentioned you're dealing with kids who have stress and ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as the underlying causes?
When I started to work with children in this capacity, it was 15 years ago, I guess. And it was at really the onset of the ADHD thing. It was kind of a new thing that kids were getting diagnosed in this way. And it was also, I don't know if you've heard of this, Rocky, but it was the time when this concept of Indigo Children started to be spoken about. Have you heard that before?
I've heard the word, and I remember reading it, but I don't remember what it means.
Yeah, it's basically the idea that 15 years ago, children were coming into this world at a different level of consciousness than previous people. And it was being spoken about by calling them Indigo Children. And some of the road bumps, shall we say, were these behaviors being exhibited that the Indigo Children folks were saying may show up looking like autism and different spectrum disorders like Asperger's and ADHD. So I was walking both sides of this fence. It was fascinating to be a traditionally trained therapist, but also an energy worker reading this stuff and watching children who were being labeled as Asperger's, autism, ADHD, stress, anxiety, things like that. And some of them medicated, some of them not. And parents seeking alternative treatments, which I wasn't a medication. I was an alternative treatment. So it was really interesting time to observe this from two different viewpoints.
And what did you learn from those observations?
Well, the main thing that I observed, and I really didn't understand this until I was a parent, but I've always been a watcher myself, an observer of life, interested in that way. And so I started to notice how very often parents exhibited some of the same tendencies that their children did, but they weren't aware of it. So, for example, I had a new client who I was going to see, and I was speaking to the parent on the phone, and she spoke very fast, and she seemed like she was kind of anxious, and she told me about all the difficulties that her son was having concentrating in school. And so I took in the phone call, I made the appointment, I went to their house, and as soon as I had the door opened for me and I met the mother, I just felt like, wow, like this is a very anxious person. And then I met her son, and her son was very high energy. And he was being labeled as having anxiety. And yet what I was observing was he was really, really, I mean, it would have been difficult for me as a parent to be with this person. He was really energetic. But it seemed like the mother was dealing with the anxiety to me. I'm not a doctor. And so I started really, after that client, I started really observing parents and how they were with their children, and how the interplay of the dynamic between the two of them, what that was like. And just like when we started the conversation and you were saying that children learn in more ways than just what they're told, like it seemed to me like there was something to that. And I wasn't too sure what that was, but now that I've been working with families for quite a long time and I'm a parent myself, I see how profound an impact we have on our children when we as adults are doing our own work, when we can come from a place within ourselves of really being clear and grounded and centered, how it has a profound effect on the outward behaviors of our children.
And so, it's interesting you say that. I had said before that there were 3 stages. The first stage is about the 0 to 5, 0 to 6 stage, where they learn to become human, so to speak. They learn to socialize. They learn to use the bathroom, to eat, and to put on their clothes and do all these things. During that part of life, they're never thinking about, why do I do this? They're never going to question and say, why do we eat carrots, right? They're just going to eat carrots because that's what they're given, if that's what you eat at home, or Pop-Tarts or whatever it is. They're mimicking the adults, learning how to be a human. And if they're mimicking an anxious, crazy mom, what do you expect?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what you're going to end up with. And I think it's important for parents to realize, especially because nowadays with 2 working parents, who's actually raising your kid? Who's the model for the majority of the time? Who is teaching your child? And you should be clear and make sure it's the right person for what you want out of your kid. But that doesn't surprise me at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. It's fascinating. It's fascinating.
So we're here today because you wrote a book called Find Your Soul's Agenda, the one word that will make your whole life a success, discovering the simplicity that makes everything clear, direct, empowered, and natural. And the one thing is, the question popped in my mind is, does everyone have the same one word?
No, each person's word is unique.
And so how do you figure out your word?
In chapter 8, there's a process, and I'm happy to walk through it if you'd like, but there's a process that we go through that begins with memory recapitulation, helping us to figure out what that one word is for us as individuals.
So is it to say, is it kind of your purpose? Is that the correct way to say it? Or is it your kind of innate way of being?
Yeah, it's both. It's both your innate way of being, it's your purpose, and also, and this is what really makes this work unique, when you find your soul's agenda, you don't just know your being state and your purpose, you see where you get stuck most often. So we were talking about this, Rocky. We were talking about how important it is to be able to watch ourselves so we can watch our patterns. Part of the just brilliance of this work is when you understand your soul's agenda, you're going to understand it in duality, from the way that you love to experience life and the way that you don't love to experience life. And you're going to understand it in very clear language. So when the spots in your life pop up where you feel like you don't like to feel, oftentimes what happens is we go unconscious, we can't watch ourselves, we get distracted, we project, like all of these different things. But when you know your soul's agenda, you have very clear language around how you most often feel when life doesn't feel and does feel like you want it to feel. So when you get in those tough spots, you're able to catch it so much more quickly. And then when you do catch it, you're able to watch yourself with so much more, awareness and patience, because you understand that in those moments you are on purpose.
And I think that's one thing we always talk about. At the core, you need to understand your purpose at whatever level it is, whether it's your work, your life, at each part of it. And once you do, it becomes so much easier to achieve it because you now know where you're going. And it's much easier to do that.
Yeah, it's a navigation system, right?
It's a navigation system, correct. And it's a lot easier to find a target or a destination when you know what it is. If you don't know what it is, you go in circles. People get lost in the forest and they walk in circles. They have no idea where they're going. It's the same thing.
Yep.
So part of that, I think, though, is overcoming ourselves. And you talk about eliminating self-sabotage, and you talk about transcending blame as well as that. How does a person do that?
Yeah, the concept of blame really is based on the idea that there can be good and bad, which is not aligned with natural laws of the universe. So when you understand the natural laws of the universe, you understand that in every situation, there are benefits and drawbacks, and equal benefits and drawbacks to every situation. So when we're blaming, we have this idea that you shouldn't, or you're bad, or, I'm bad if we're blaming ourselves. And usually what happens when we start to bring more consciousness to the blame game is this: usually people will recognize that they blame other people, and they'll have an awareness that, wow, what I see in other people reflects myself. So then all of a sudden we get that and we start to go, well, oh my, I got to blame me. Why am I thinking like this? Why am I feeling like this? And then we start to recognize, like I was saying, equal amounts of benefits and drawbacks. Like, wait a minute, there's no problem here. So the blame is like, it can dissolve away because it's an illusion. Like, it doesn't even need to be there if we understand that everything that's happening is happening for our higher purpose. Everything that is happening in service to us as an opportunity for us to grow and get the life that we really want to live. So all of a sudden, blame goes poof like a magic trick because it's no longer applicable.
And I agree with that. We will be back with our guest in a moment. As part of one of my mastermind groups, I receive feedback that people may not be clear with what I do and how I help. I'm also niching my focus down. My ideal clients are small business owners, and I help them with clarity around their financial numbers. I help ensure profitability, cash flow, and also balance with other areas of life. My clients find that they're able to make tough choices in their business with clarity, and also knowing they've examined the issues and explored all the options. We're constantly shifting the way we look at situations so that we can move forward and not be stuck with indecision. I work with the owner, the accountant, and the bookkeeper to keep everyone focused on the bigger picture. If you're a small business owner who needs help with the business side of business, reach out and we can schedule a call to see if I'm a good fit to help you. Now, let's get back to our amazing conversation with Ani. You mentioned natural laws and being in congruence with those. What do you mean by natural laws?
Natural laws are the organizing forces in the universe that are omnipresent, so they're everywhere. They're unconditional, meaning they don't, they're not judging any of us, and they're applicable to everyone. So wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever you did, they're applicable. And gravity isn't a natural law, but it's easy to talk about. It's like gravity. It doesn't care. Gravity doesn't care who you are or what's been going on in your life. If you walk off a cliff, you're going to fall. It doesn't care how old you are. It doesn't care if you're in China or Egypt or wherever. And natural laws are like that. They're the organizing force of nature. And humans have forgotten that they're part of nature. That's part of it. But also, Rocky, we don't learn these things in school. So it's not like we have a basis. Most people don't have a basis for understanding the organizing forces of the universe because they were never taught them. But they're operating even if we don't know or understand them.
And that's true. We don't have to know what gravity is to know that it works.
Mm-hmm.
Until we learn it. And it took a long time, I think, for humans to learn what gravity was.
Yeah, right.
And then all of a sudden they figured it out. Oh, that's why that happens. And that's probably true with human nature. I think we're coming back to a better understanding of human nature. I think at some point there was a split where we might have gotten away from it, or maybe we've never had it. But it seems like as you go back through history and you look at various religious texts and you start digging into them, you see in each of them, there are some certain truths and some certain laws that kind of have always been shared. But I think the reality is also, if you look back in history, there was no way for the average person to know them. It was shared amongst a very small group of people because only those who had access or only those who could read or only those who got those stories were able to learn them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything you just said. And you're reminding me of something that I'd forgotten. When I started to learn energy medicine, I learned from an osteopath who went against the community of osteopaths so that he could teach what he was doing to anybody who had a license to touch. So doctors, nurses, chiropractors, physical therapists, occupational therapists like myself. He was a doctor trained in osteopathy, and he went against the community to train other people who were not quite as highly trained as him. And that was a big deal. And I've seen incarnations of this over my 20 years in the personal development industry of different things like this. For example, the person that I was trained in Tai Chi and Qigong, he went against the grain, and instead of teaching a lineage of a certain kind of Tai Chi, he took different aspects from different kinds of Tai Chi and teaches them to everyone, not just people who are going to carry through the lineage. It's really, I think, important to me in my work as I bring forth energy medicine to anyone in ways that everyone can understand. What you were just saying about like passing on this information. It used to be that information was passed on only to select groups of individuals, but I am a big fan of, and I think there's way more of this happening now, sharing information that all of us can use with everybody, or as many people as are willing to learn.
And that is so true. Within my lifetime, I have seen that shift dramatically. I mean, when I was younger and when I was a kid, information was gold. The ability to find information, to know anything was almost impossible. I mean, just even being, you think we're talking about kids and teenagers, and you hear these lyrics to a song and you're not sure what they are. There was no way to really truly find out what they were. I mean, sometimes you could see them written on an album cover, but then you had to have the album, which cost money, and information was power and money. And, hey, I won't tell you. Today, I have Google. Anything and everything I want to know, I can find out in an instant. And so information is no longer gold. It's freely available. You can learn to do anything you want to do at a pretty high level. I think the harder part today is digging through misinformation to find what's truly true and what's real.
Oh, gosh, I so agree with that. I think we're moving into an age of insight where insight is really what people are thirsty for. And in order to develop insight, we need to wade through the information to determine, like you were saying, what's real, because there's so much information out there. I feel like such an old fart sometimes when my kids will say, hey, look up blah, 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 or ask Siri. Ask Siri what this or that is. And I go into my dissertation, just like I'm sure my grandfather would say, I walked up to school with barefoot in the snow uphill both ways. And I'm like, when I was a kid, we didn't have Siri. I had to go to the library.
That's true. And you had an encyclopedia, which had 3 paragraphs
right
on the subject. Whoop-de-doo-dah. That isn't a lot. That kind of begs the question. In your book, you say that trying to be normal is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you say that?
If you go to the Google and you look up statistics about things, I'll just use health as an example. We are not a healthy society. The amount of medications that we use, the amount of stress that people are under. When you look at the average person, there is a tremendous amount of drama and chaos and illness and dis-ease, shall we say. And, what's fascinating to me is everybody wants to belong. Everybody wants to belong. It's human nature. But the ways in which we choose to belong very often are around bonding over things like how stressed out you are. We go to work and what do we talk about? How hard it is at home. And we go home and we talk about how hard it is at work, and we're bonding over stress. I think that's dangerous. I think striving to be a part of that normal is dangerous. It's dangerous to our health, but it's dangerous to our peace of mind. What really brings inner peace and subsequently health in all areas of life is understanding who we are and feeling good about who we are as individuals.
And that's very true. You do have to understand who you are. And it's funny because when you look at averages and if you looked at what the average income is, most people wouldn't want to live on an average income because it's far lower than most people realize, depending on where you are in the United States. And it varies tremendously by area. And then when you look at even the top 20%, even within that top 20%, there's a dramatic difference as you go up the curve. And so just shooting for normal or what everyone else does is going to give you a life that's probably not so nice, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah. It wasn't until I found coaching, life coaching in my own life, that I really started to find out a new way to be and watch myself and how I talk. Like if I was going to go to the grocery store, what kind of conversations am I found having? I started to become aware of my life in a really different way when I found coaching, because the paradigm of therapeutics, at least when I was in, and I think still to a certain degree, and I was doing therapeutic work, really looks at where is the problem and how do we get somebody back to baseline? Where is the problem? How do we get somebody back to baseline? And the coaching factor was really looking more at how can I take where I am and improve? How can I be better than I've been before? And that was a really giant shift for me in my consciousness and how I thought about life, and just how I lived my life every day as I started to look at that difference. How can I improve today?
And it's interesting you say that, because what exactly is baseline? And as the world continues to evolve and things continue to move forward, I mean, if you're standing still, you're getting behind. And so It seems like baseline would be way, way back.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, we're always evolving. Everything is always growing. So what the heck does that mean anyway?
So you mentioned another thing that I found interesting, and that is the law of polarity is always working. Can you share what that means and what an example might be?
Sure. We live in a world of duality. There's always two sides to everything. And everything is created as a whole. There is always an equal and opposite to everything. Now, the hard part about talking about this, Rocky, is that human perception can't always perceive the whole. So I'll give you an example here of what I mean about the whole in a way that we can all understand. I've got a book in front of me. I'm going to hold it up. And when I hold up the book, I can see the cover. Now, I know there's a backside to this, but I can't see it right now. But there is a backside to this book. There's also an outside of the book and an inside of the book. There's a top and there's a bottom. And by the way, the top is as far from the bottom as the bottom is from the top. It's equal and opposite. Now, if I didn't know that there was a backside to this book and I had it in front of me, I might think that it was just a front. It was just the cover. And see, that's how human perception can be. We can, if we can't see two sides to the story, and there's always two sides, always, always, always. If we can't see two sides, we can be fooled into thinking that it's just one way. And so the law of polarity tells us there's always two sides to make a whole, two equal and opposite sides. And it begs us when our perspective is what we call polarized or stuck on one side, to really expand our mind and ask, where is the other side of this? So for example, where there is lack, there must be abundance. That's a law of polarity. And so if someone were to come to me and say, I have a lack in my life, I would start to help them to see where there is abundance, because equal and opposite, it must be there. That is the basis of what I do every day with people, is help people to expand their perspective so that they can see both sides. Because until you can truly see both sides, you can't truly choose.
I believe that there are multiple sides. I mean, I always talk about looking through lenses. We all have our own unique perspective and lens and how we look at something. And so you talk about the book, and you're correct. So I can look at the lens of the book and say, there's the front, there's the back, there's 4 other sides, the inside, the outside. And depending on where I'm looking and how close or how far away I am, it dramatically shifts my thinking of that book. And depending on what the title is, I might like the book or hate the book on top of it too. So that's bringing in all of these other factors. And yet when we look at things in life, we look at them as a single dimension. And we don't evaluate all of those other things. And I think that's why we get stuck.
Yeah, what you're talking about to me sounds like curiosity. I know there's another way to look at this. And once we allow curiosity to enter, unlimited possibilities exist, right? So, so important to expand our minds and open up with curiosity to allow another lens, another view, another way to look at things.
That is absolutely true. And I think I had another guest on where we talked about curiosity is kind of the way forward of being able to do that and look at that. So you've mentioned a lot about your clients. What is it that they generally struggle with, and what do you do to help them overcome that?
Most of my clients are looking for help with relationships, whether it's business relationships or personal relationships. And Rocky, what I find to be true all the time is it doesn't matter which it is that they're coming for. The thread of the issue shows itself in the personal life and the professional life in some way, which is super fascinating to me. So most people are coming for that. And what I help them to do, first of all, is to understand the natural laws and how their mind works, not just their brain between their ears, but their body mind. So I help people to really tap into understanding the information that they're getting from their thoughts and the information that they're getting from their sensations, so that they can find real clarity and make powerful decisions to move forward with their lives, understanding their relationships as a foundational factor in the success of life.
And we talk about that. That is one of the keys here at Richer Soul. Relationships are a major portion of life, and without them, your life probably isn't going to be that nice. And so we need to put time and effort into it. We need to be intentional with our relationships. And then again, just like looking at that book, when we look at another person, there's a million ways to look at them, and they're looking at us a million ways. And part of it is what we think, but the reality is the nonverbal signals that we give off, which are kind of our body and how we stand and how we look and those types of things that we give off also dramatically affect the perception other people have of us, and also the perception we put out or try to convey to the world as well.
Yeah, it's huge.
And so when you say body mind, is that what you mean by that? Or is there something more beyond that?
Yes, and there's even more beyond that. So absolutely everything you just said. And, really helping people to understand that it's actually the sensations that are the raw data of the nervous system and how to use that as information. A lot of times we're not very intelligent in this culture and society in terms of being able to understand and utilize our sensory experience. And I think one of the reasons is because, life was really hard for most of human history. It wasn't until more recently that the modern conveniences have helped us to have a, shall we say, easier life. But for most of human history, life has been pretty hard. So we're very ingrained with hard living and pain. And that's where our understanding of our sensations and our language really kind of our conversations really go around. We're not very versed in talking about pleasure. We're not talking about how our senses can give us a lot of information. So I think this is a fairly new concept that has been emerging for a number of years to really understand that it's not just the thoughts that we think that control our life. It's actually the sensations actually really drive our behavior. And one of the ways to think about this is this. I like to say that it's not the thought of fear that stops us. It's the sensory experience of fear that stops us from moving forward. So that's just a powerful example of how much our senses are really driving our behavior, and we are most often not aware of it.
And that's very true. I mean, if you think about every state that you're in, when you're happy, your body's a certain way. When you're depressed, your body's a certain way. When you're fearful, your body's a certain way in the sense that, even the hair on the back of your neck stands up. Your body is reacting to all these emotions. And I think you're correct. When they become that strong in the moment, we feel them. But the rest of the time, we're so somewhat numbed by all of society that we probably forget them all.
Yeah.
And we don't tune in.
Yeah. A lot of people have forgotten they're there, and you can develop the skills to be able to understand yourself and your body on a subtle level so that you don't experience pain and you don't experience disease and illness as often because you're aware of the subtleties.
So when you say that, is it because you understand what's going on in your body and you feel it and you correct and you don't ignore it, or is there something else?
Yeah, it's basically that. It's becoming aware of and then allowing it to be there. So often we can become aware of and then we try to push it away. And when we try to push it away, a lot of times what we do is numb it out in all kinds of ways. And I'm not just talking about like eating to numb or going shopping to numb, but literally like not having a certain conversation because we don't want to feel a certain way or that kind of thing. It's something that we're very good at.
And that's very true. So what happens once we find our soul's agenda? What comes next?
Well, it's that compass. It's a way, and there are numerous ways to find a compass in your life. It is a way that you can use. It's a method you can use as a compass in your life for decision making. And since we make about 35,000 decisions a day, it's kind of handy to have a resource for decision making. So that's really the next step. Finding it is one thing, using it's the second.
And that's true. Once you know where you're going and what you want, decisions become super easy because you have something to judge them again. It makes it easy to make choices because then the question is always, is this serving me and what my true purpose is, or isn't it? And it brings that level of clarity that makes it so much easier for people to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
So is there anything else that you wanted to share on the subject of living a more meaningful and richer life, but didn't get a chance to?
No, I think the thing I just want to highlight is that in terms of leading a richer life, we were talking about the sensory experience, and I would just encourage anybody who's listening, who's enjoyed this conversation, to really become aware of what you're feeling moment to moment. And when you feel things, allow them to be there. Because allowing any and all sensations to be there will allow any and all emotions to be present, including the emotions we love to feel, vitality and excitement and joy and all that great stuff, love. So if this has resonated with you, that's a real action step you can take going forward to really be present with yourself in every moment. And when you feel something, allow it to be there. It's a big, big deal just to do that in a person's life.
And you already answered the next question, which is based on our conversation. It's funny because invariably, it seems these days during interviews, that comes out right before I have to ask the question. The universe just delivers that answer. It's like I don't have to prompt people anymore.
I think we've gotten to a place where we're pretty action focused too, which is really exciting. I remember 10 years ago, you read a book, a lot of times it would be about philosophy, and you'd put it down and say, well, now what the heck do I do? I think we're a little bit more action focused nowadays.
And that you have to. I mean, it's wonderful to learn, and it's great to be curious. And I've spent my whole life doing that. But at the end of the day, you have to implement some of it. And you have to actually take action to improve yourself and take that next step and figure out what it is that you want or whatever it is that you want to learn. I mean, it doesn't have to be even personal. It can just be action oriented of learning to do woodwork or play music or dance or write, or maybe it's career oriented. What's one thing you can do to improve yourself, your career? What's one skill you can learn and start to go read up on it and take action?
Yep, absolutely.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. So now it's time to learn about the secrets of living an abundant life.
Okay.
What's your secret to living life?
Okay. So my secret to living an abundant life is to not be afraid of negativity, because negativity is the thing that points me in the direction of where my abundance is next.
What did you learn later in life that you wished you would have learned sooner?
To be lighthearted. I used to take myself super seriously, and as I age, I kind of feel like a Benjamin Button. I seem to get more childlike and joyful as I age. I was a really serious kid, so I wish I had learned that earlier.
I was going to say, I think we all do, but then there's all those old curmudgeons. So maybe not all of us do, right? I know I have. I've learned to lighten up and to let go as I've gotten older. And it's probably because I was a serious kid too. So maybe that's what it is. The serious kids learn to lighten up, and maybe they don't. You never know. What's one piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
Have more fun, which I guess is along similar lines, like relax, take it easy. I was a super, super duper high achiever, and it's not that I don't love to achieve things, but I used to be on it all the time in achievement mode. And if I could speak to my younger self, I would sit me down and say, hey, listen, what would be fun? You have my permission to go and do that.
And it's funny because I've talked to a lot of people who have become millionaires in their 20s and early 30s. And they were highly driven and focused to do that. And if you ask them, looking back, what's one thing you would do different? They said that drive and that serious focus caused them to lose out on life, and that they should have kind of taken that step back and enjoyed a little bit.
Interesting.
If people would like to learn more about you and find you, what's the best place for them to find you and connect?
Sure. So my website is AniAnderson.com. That's ANI Anderson. And that's where you can find me. And you can also find my book website there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I will put all of that in the show notes. And it was great to have you here. And I learned a lot, and hopefully the audience did as well.
It was a great conversation, Rocky. Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed the conversation with Ani. Today, we saw how money, relationships, health, and mindsets all fit together. Are you stressed, busy, always running around? Why? Did you have any shifts today in the way that you think? Are you looking at something differently? Where you focus attention is where you get results. This week's action step: become aware of what you're feeling in the moment and allow the feelings to be there. It's about observation. You need to create the space to feel and pay attention to your body. If you're still listening, you must have liked this episode. So please share it with a few friends. And if you get a chance, leave a review. I'd appreciate that. You can also connect with me on Facebook, and there is both a Facebook page and a Facebook group for Richer Soul. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals through coaching and accountability? Just email me, and we can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit for coaching. For many people, one session allows them to take a giant leap forward towards their dreams. You can reach me at Rocky@Richer Soul. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I have shared has helped you. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.